Well, ladies and gentlemen, midterms are right around the corner. And you're probably thinking to yourself, isn't it a little bit early to be talking about this? Yes, it is. However, there have been some very interesting developments that are, shall we say, a bit unusual, which could give us some indication of how the midterms will go. Now, it's important to talk about this because all it takes is a couple of seats in the House, a few seats in the Senate, and all of a sudden, everything in Washington, D.C. grinds to an absolute halt. And I don't mean the halt that we're typically used to with respect to the DC grind. I mean, it's done. Trump is not going to be able to do pretty much anything else. If he loses the Senate by one seat, if he loses the House by one seat, I promise you they will vote in lockstep to ensure that nothing else happens with the agenda. Plus, they'll probably start launching investigations against him again. This is just what happens. So understanding the midterms is important, especially the things we're going to talk about. So what we're going to do today is we're going to frame up kind of the landscape of what's going on, why we think it's important. We're going to go ahead and discuss it from the various perspectives of the Republicans, the Democrats, some of the pollsters and out there that are making predictions. And then finally, we're going to give you our conclusions and analysis. And as is tradition, I'm going to force everyone to make wild predictions way too early in the game to come back and see who was the most right of all of us. Last time, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees, won the prediction contest because she predicted in March of last year that Joe Biden would not be the nominee. And Christian and I both looked at Tina like, oh, there's no way that could happen. And we were wrong. And we had to sing the Tina Was Right song because you were right, babe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
good.
right. And it happens so rarely that you'll tell me that I'm right that I just have to just have to soak it up.
That is
It's
untrue.
great.
That is untrue. And then, of course, along with my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees, we have our resident historian, political prognosticator, the Oracle of Virginia, the guy that is right way more often than just
me.
about anybody else. Predicting these things. Christian Hines, how are you doing, man?
You didn't need to gas me up that much.
Oh, no. If you get it wrong, you're fired. This is
Although my theory,
lots riding on this prediction, Christian, like your job.
My theory is that the reason Christian is right so much is that he changes his mind all the way up until the point, back and forth.
New data, honey, new data. That's not
cover all your bases.
Analyzes
and you'll
data
never...
all the way up. He won't make a wild early prediction. He will always try to skirt around it and say, if this, then that.
Yeah.
Then he can be right.
You know, one of the three maxims of the Oracle of Delphi was make a pledge and mischief is at hand.
Yeah.
Basically, the translation being, don't ever say anything, don't ever promise anything, because otherwise you'll get into trouble.
Well, I remember. Well, you read about that. I think it was in the New Testament where somebody swore an oath that I can't remember who they're going to kill. Peter, maybe it was Paul, but they swore an oath that they would not eat until they had killed him. Oops. So, well, I'll tell you this: as we're making predictions, I'll give you one prediction that I am absolutely positive of, and that is, if you order Good Ranchers, you are going to be pleased with what you get. That's right. Over 85% of grass-fed beef sold in the U.S. stores is imported. Did you know that? I didn't. That's horrible. Good Ranchers offers 100% American source meat supporting local farms. Also, they're totally free from hidden additives, no antibiotics, no added hormones, no seed oils. All the stuff that you don't want. If you are Maha, if you are concerned about this, Good Ranch is actually delivering you a really quality product. And we know because we consume it just about daily at this point. I absolutely love Good Ranchers. They've actually ruined me on other meats that I was getting in other places that I had been perfectly satisfied with until I had the deliciousness the Good Ranchers delivers right to your door. So if you are planning some barbecues over the summer, and you should be because this is America, right? Go onto the Good Ranchers site, check them out. In fact, if you go to goodranchers.com and you use my exclusive code, Nick, N-I-C-K, goodranchers.com, use my exclusive code, Nick, not only are you going to get free meat with your subscription, that's right, they're going to add more stuff on to what they're already sending directly to your door, but you're going to get $40 off your order too, just because they love you. Just because they love you, all right? Go over to goodranchers.com, use that promo code, support the show, support a good company, and support yourself. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Now, the first thing I want to do on framing this question is we kind of discussed in the intro. This is important because the House is a razor thin margin, and you lose one seat in the House. I don't care if it's one seat. Democrats will vote in lockstep to prevent this. They then get to control all of the committees. They get to control the entire budget process from the House perspective. They get to launch whatever investigations they want into whatever they dream up against Donald Trump. So there's a lot riding on this. There's a lot riding on this because it's not as if Trump got in there and played it safe, right? He went He went full to the wall. We've also got things like Elon Musk's America Party, right? And who knows what's actually going to happen with that, because Elon Musk is, again, sometimes I think he's a little naive with politics, but he's a smart guy. He's got a lot of money. And I will say this much, when he was talking about the America Party, he was talking about very specifically targeting certain seats. He's not trying to go after everything. He's just trying to go after certain ones. And that can be enough to flip the tide. And so we need to start thinking about this. All right. Now, here's the other thing to keep in mind. If you believe that you want, or if you want Donald Trump to be able to continue with his agenda, he has to have a Congress that's working with him. This is one thing that kind of irritates me a lot. I hear people say, oh, I can't believe they never did anything, or why didn't they do this, or enough talk. Guys, the way our government works is you generally need multiple branches of the government working in some coherent fashion with one another, right? The president can do various things with respect to foreign policy, with respect to running executive branch agencies. He can do things without congressional permission, but if he wants to do big things, right, the sort of things that you want to see, he needs Congress to be on board with that. And so he needs a Congress that's going to work with him. He also generally needs a Supreme Court that is not going to try to obstruct him, or a federal judiciary that's not going to try to obstruct him every step of the way. So progress has been made, but it could all come to a screaming halt after the midterms. And guess what? Bad news. This is the bad news part. When you look throughout history, historically speaking, the incumbent president's party always loses seats in the midterms. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. But not a lot. Not many of them. And usually something incredible has to be taking place, like we're at war and there's overwhelming patriotism and overwhelming support for the president conducting the fight. For instance, the last time it happened in our lifetime, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, last time it happened in my lifetime where Congress, the opposing party, the president's party picked up seats in Congress during the midterms was in 2002, right after the September 11th attacks, and we were conducting operations in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it was a full generation ago, 24 years ago. Well, will be 24 years ago next year.
So 24 years ago was the last time that the incumbent president picked up seats during the midterms, right? And it is not unusual for the House to flip and things of that nature.
That was also the last time that the president's party held the House in a midterm election. Yeah. So every midterm election since 2002, the president's party, if they've controlled the chamber going into the midterm election, they have lost control of the chamber, and they've certainly lost seats. This happened in 2006 when the House flipped to the Democrats. This happened in 2010 when the House flipped to the Republicans. It happened in 2014 when the Republicans obviously held the House and picked up even more seats. It happened in 2018 when the House flipped to the Democrats. And technically, even though it was a disappointment for us, it happened in 2022 when the House flipped back to the Republicans as well. The other previous time in terms of like recent history, for some people it's ancient history like myself, was in 1998 when Republicans held the House, but they actually lost seats in the midterm election for a variety of reasons. The economy was doing really well. We were kind of we were just getting close to the peak of the dot-com bubble. There was just this overall like popular sentiment that things were going well. Bill Clinton was popular even though he was in the middle of the Lewinsky scandal, and there was this idea that Republicans had overstepped in trying to impeach Clinton, and so they actually lost a few seats. But they did hold the House in that election, though. It didn't flip to the Democrats.
So now that I think everyone's now kind of brought up to the same sheet of music. This is kind of the historical perspective. This is, now moving into this. Now we're going to talk a little bit about kind of where we are right now. And we're going to hit that from, again, Democrat perspective, Republican perspective, et cetera, to try to get a comprehensive view of where we're at. So let's dive into that. What are we looking at right now?
So right now, the Democratic Party is in utter disarray.
Yeah.
This is one of the arguments in favor of the idea that Republicans might be able to defy history because, quite frankly, I don't really get the vibe that the Democratic Party has really learned much of anything from the last election. Like, for example, there was this guy, this state legislator in Texas that went on Joe Rogan's podcast a few days ago, and nothing that he said implied that the Democratic Party has learned anything.
The only one that I've seen that I feel like is kind of gets it, like Rahm Emanuel, which is a little bit ironic to me because Rahm Emanuel was part of he was the
never let a crisis go to waste.
Chief of staff for the Obama administration, and he was actually pretty critical in pushing things. However, I will say that he's always been kind of more on the economic populism side of the Democratic Party as opposed to like the woke side. But that doesn't mean he wasn't a key part of the administration that ushered in woke and started to make it mainstream. So it's a little bit disingenuous coming from
John Fetterman has said some similar stuff.
Yeah, Fetterman seems to get it. He seems to be more of kind of a like the old school union style Democrat. The other ones that have kind of like Bill Maher. Bill Maher obviously understands that wokeness has kind of gone nuts. But Carville to some degree, Carville's just kind of so obnoxious to listen to sometimes. But he does seem to understand that there's a problem with. Well, I'll put it this way. And I was talking to Dr. Steve Turley, who just wrote the book America Awakened. And one of the things he talks about in his book is this like never-ending Democrat death spiral where they go all in on 80-20 positions. And what that means is 20% of the country cares about this issue. 80% either doesn't care or has a problem with it. And the Democrats make it their whole persona. Transing the kids is a perfect example of this. Now, the thing I would fire back on is you need to understand it isn't 20% of their base. It's actually a significant portion of their base because that's the sort of base they've created.
And what they do over time is they turn 80-20 issues into 80-20 issues the other way because once they do get power, it might take them a while, but once they do get power, they just ram it through anyway. They ram it through the courts. They did it with gay marriage, right?
Yeah. I mean, Obama lit up the whole White House with the gay pride.
And so they are very aggressive about once they're in power, they don't back off or moderate. We run away from our issues when we get elected, right? We decide somebody once said that Republicans campaign as libertarians and then govern like Democrats.
Yeah. Well, my argument is that I said, I'll give this much to the Democrats. When Democrats are in the minority, they act like they're in the majority. And when they're in the majority, they act like there'll never be another election.
Yeah.
Republicans, on the other hand, when we're in the majority, we act like we're in the minority. And when we're in the minority, we just act like cowards. And,
But, the Democrats have been so used to winning, to quote our current president, for the last, really basically my whole lifetime, that I don't think that they're really used to being in an environment where, no, they are currently the minority. And it's not just in the sense that they've lost an election. Like, they lost the popular vote in the last election. They lost every single swing state. The entire country shifted 6 points to the right in 2024. That's one of the largest shifts of any election from left to right or right to left in my lifetime, in the last 30 years. And on that point, I don't see any signs that the Democratic Party has learned anything. A good example is there's this poll that just came out really recently by Quinnipiac. I've got it pulled up here.
Yeah.
That shows that, what is this? A 19% approval rating for the Democratic Party, and 72% disapprove.
Quinnipiac is not a right-wing pollster. It's generally well respected on all sides.
What's so funny about this is that this has dropped even further. At one point, it was like in the mid-20s. And so there's no sign that this is going to slow down. Now, some people look at this and was like, oh, see, the Democrats are going to get crushed in the next election because look at how high their disapproval rating is. A lot of this are Democrats disapproving of their own party. We had the same phenomenon during the Obama era where polling showed consistently that the Republican Party was more unpopular than the Democratic Party. And so on the left, they were always using this as, I remember when I was like in high school and in early college, 2011, 2012, all of these like smug liberals that were like, oh, these extremist Tea Party Republicans, they're never going to win anything ever again. Look at how deeply unpopular they are. The American people aren't going to accept that. Like these were the same people that, would read the Washington Post and listen to NPR, and they were just such enlightened, they didn't, just so full of themselves.
Yeah.
And they were totally blindsided when 2016 came along because they thought that the extent of the Overton window went as far as Ted Cruz on the right.
Yeah.
And that's it. You couldn't go any farther.
Not even that far. He was an extremist.
Mitt Romney was called a fascist. He was literally, there's a piece by NPR, I don't have it pulled up, but there's a piece by NPR where they called him a fascist in the 2012 presidential election because he recited the Pledge of Allegiance at his rallies.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I actually have some issues with the history behind it. It was
issue.
But still, the point is that people look at this and they're like, well, the Democratic Party's kind of doomed because they're so unpopular. They're in a hole, but I assure you, they're going to try to dig out of that hole. They're just trying to figure. They're looking for the shovel right now to dig out of it.
Anybody that's sitting here predicting, the Democrats are done. Like, I'm sorry, you're not. I can't take that seriously. I think you're absolutely right that when we look at, if you were to ask me who is the current leader of the Democratic Party, I really couldn't give you a name. Like, nobody's questioning. First of all, nobody's questioning who the leader of the Republican Party is. It's Donald Trump. I would argue. I would go so far as to say, very few people right now would question who we think the successor is going to be. I mean, if it were today, it would be J.D. Vance, right? And so, in many cases, whether you like Republicans, don't like Republicans, we obviously Republicans have their own issues and whatnot. There seems to be cohesion with respect to leadership and direction for the most part. With the Democrats, I can't tell you who their leader is. And then the other thing too is that the people that they are selecting in their own primaries right now. Mamdani is a perfect example of this. They picked a trust fund communist, right, to be their mayoral candidate in New York City, right, to run against the current, incumbent black was Democrat, now independent, mayor of New York. And when we say independent, he's not really an independent. He's definitely on the left, but he's not a crazy person. And more the people that are not crazy are being pushed out of Democrat leadership positions.
Dean Phillips said something similar. He was the obscure congressman that ran against Joe Biden in the primaries and obviously got crushed. Yeah. And then Biden, it was correct, all of his criticisms of Biden, because then Biden dropped out of the race. Dean Phillips said a couple of weeks ago, he's like, I don't think that the Democratic Party has a place for somebody like me and Mamdani. And I'm starting to see that their approach to we're the coalition of the ascendant. Yeah. We're the new rising majority. Yeah. No, your coalition's going to keep fraying as you bring in new voting blocks that are going to end up competing with each other. It's the same problem that, like, for example, the Labour Party has in the UK. Yeah. They had this idea for so long. Well, let's just have open borders and import in new voters because we can't win over the current voters in the UK. Well, turns out that eventually you get to a point where there's a critical mass of these new voters and they just vote for their own guys. They don't end up voting for you. The same problem is going to end up happening within the Democratic Party in the U.S. We have so many different new voting blocks that it's not enough for them to just be like, well, we're just going to be the party of all the minorities. Yeah. Well, but they all have their own different interests. And it's not just on a racial or ethnic basis. You also have it within ideologies. Mm-hmm. You have it within culture. You have it within religion. There's almost an infinite number of ways that you can slice and dice the Democratic coalition. And if the only thing that they have in common is, well, we're not Republicans, that's not enough to maintain a coalition eventually. You're going to end up losing groups. They're going to end up splintering off, doing their own thing, dragging the party in a direction that maybe you as a whole don't want, and it's going to make your brand look toxic over time.
I was going to also add to that you can kind of see what happened with David Hogue, where he got caught like on a hot mic saying, okay, well, yeah, we believe this, but we're not going to message it that way. We can't talk about this. Yeah. And him saying we can't talk about this, whatever extreme idea it was, I can't remember what it was, but exposing that, like, even on the left, they're trying to figure out how do we message this to the general public, because we know this idea is kind of extreme, so we're going, even though we believe it, we're not going to talk about it. And he got pushed out because of it. So the extreme in his own party don't want to moderate their message. And I mean, we kind of had this issue during the Tea Party era on the right, where it was like you would have people that were so blazing hot on the right that they wanted to eliminate all moderates from their party. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to do the Big Tent thing. And I think that sort of crisis of identity is happening again on the left, though, instead of on the right.
No, I tend to agree with that. I think the left is, again, for the left, as we think of them, for the longest time, has been rooted by a couple of concepts. And a lot of it was, first of all, left-wing economic policy, which was very redistributive in nature. And the spectrum of left-wing economic policy was everything from capitalist countries with high welfare states and, progressive taxation and redistribution of wealth to complete government ownership of the means of production, right? Like that's the spectrum of left-wing economic policy. But then there was also this element of hyper egalitarianism, right? It was equality. And then the way it developed over time on the left is it really bought into this idea of critical theory. It really brought in this idea, like there was the postmodernist tendencies where, in order to have a truly open society, we have to get rid of this notion of like objective truth. And it's all about perspective, and it's all about identity, and it's all about, intersectionality. The problem is they have gotten to a point where I think a lot of this stuff, it moved way too far, way too fast. During COVID, people became much more aware of what was going on, and to the extent that it had gotten, when they doubled down on the trans movement, I feel like that was something where they really revealed just how far they were willing to go, and how far they were willing to go to criticize, deplatform, fire. They were willing to use the full power of not only social ostracizing, but government power to shut down and deplatform you. And then all of a sudden, more people who had never really been in the realm of politics were awakened to what they were doing and what woke really meant and how far they were willing to go.
There is a question in the chat.
Just let me finish this part right here. And then what the Democratic Party is trying to do right now is you have this certain element of the Democratic Party that still believes in like left-wing politics as a general rule. And they're the ones saying, okay, guys, we need to pivot back to like bread and butter issues, right? We need to pivot back to that. They don't understand that they have built such an important part of their coalition, such an important part of their base, which they absolutely rely on to get out, march, protest, vote, whatever else. They bought into all of this. They are completely bought into the identity politics thing, the critical theory side. And for the Democrats, for the more moderate Democrats, to say, hey, guys, we need to readjust, that's treason. Right, that's treason. It is. You are now evil. You're now part of the fascists because you're not willing to save the trans kids of Mississippi, as Christian likes to say, right? And so that's the part where I think they're contending with right now, and they are trying to figure out a path. They're trying to navigate their way through this, but then you see the people that they're picking in primaries, like the mayor. They had a very left-wing Democrat mayor in Minneapolis. They just had a race. They picked, I think he's a Somali immigrant
he was actually born here, but his parents came from Somalia.
Parents came from Somalia. And this
not
guy,
that really changes anything, because he's gone out there saying we need to care about our homeland.
Yes.
Which is not America.
No,
he's
talking about Somalia. And then he's going around talking about how white people are the problem. Like he is actively campaigning on white people are the problem. And very, very Marxist tendencies, very, very critical theory-based tendencies. And you look at this, it's like, and it was funny because people are very concerned. There are people in the more moderate element, or we'll just say the more aware element within the Democratic Party. Moderate's not even the right term, who realize that this doesn't message well. This does not message well to the people that they have been hemorrhaging, and they are trying to like rein some of it in. And like you said, it's not like Abigail Spanberger said this when she barely won re-election in 2020. She got hot mic'd on a call where she told the Democratic caucus, stop talking about socialism. Stop. This is hurting us when you campaign on this.
I'm pretty sure there was an expletive in there.
There were a bunch of expletives in there too.
It was. Why? And it wasn't, hey, we're not socialists, guys. This isn't what we believe. It was, don't talk about it. It doesn't brief well. You saw the same thing when you had the riots going on in Los Angeles. And everybody's rolling around with every flag except the American one. And then all of a sudden you see people like, we got to carry the American flag. This is feeding into their narrative. They didn't mean, hey, carry the American flag, guys, because we're patriotic and we care about this. And no, it was carry the American flag because the optics are bad. So
on that front.
Hold on. I've got a question from the chat.
Okay, yeah.
Can I ask it now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to spin off to another thing. Okay, Chris Murray said, how do these midterms either stabilize or flip state races? Can the states flip enough to counter the federal table?
I don't know. We're not really looking at the state. That's first of all, it's a very interesting, it's a very important question. Typically speaking, whenever you're talking about federal elections, generally speaking, whoever's doing well in the federal elections when they're combined with state elections, that party does well, unless you have like a very, very popular governor or attorney general or whatever.
Or a state's been badly mismanaged.
Yeah. Then you can, but generally speaking, if you have kind of a typical Republican state and the Republicans do well in the federal elections and it's coincided with the state, then you can expect that to be replicated on the state level unless there's some sort of big scandal or something else. In places like Virginia, it's like Virginia, I think Virginia, Alabama, New Jersey, and Louisiana, or Mississippi. Whatever. There's like 4 states that we're off the federal cycle.
Kentucky's one of those states with their gubernatorial elections too.
So we're off the federal cycle, which means we have our House of Delegates races and our gubernatorial, attorney general, lieutenant governor races in Virginia this year. And typically what ends up happening on those types of races is it's a referendum on whoever's in office at the federal level. Again, there's always very, very specific state issues. I will say there's one thing though that really feeds into that, and that is the fundraising component. And we're going to get into that in just a moment, and we'll explain how that kind of factors in. But kind of the overall thing from the Democrat perspective is they're in trouble right now with respect to a messaging component. They're in trouble right now with respect to a leadership component. They're having a hard time organizing around a specific, easy to understand message, as well as good messengers for that message.
They're also having trouble with big news media outlets carrying water for them anymore. And also things like NPR and PBS and all of these things that are getting defunded. They've had a bunch of situations where it was revealed that there's like a lot more scrutiny on them now than before. And they got caught in a whole scandal where Act Blue was funneling big donors' donations through hundreds of small through these people that never even had given, like mostly elderly people and people like that, and making it look as though they had each given the max that you can give for a federal election. So they're trying to track the money and see where this money came from, and they're also recognizing that they have a big old microscope on them now, and they've been involved in all kinds of scandalous things with ethics, and it's like they can't hide from it anymore. And so usually they could depend on kind of this apparatus they had in place that I think is sort of limping along now, and they're not able to utilize it as much, and they don't have the chokehold on the information that they used to have. We've got X, where literally nothing gets censored on X almost. Yeah. And then all the other news media outlets are also kind of in a race to try to make sure they don't over-censor either, even though they do still engage in it a bit. And so the free flow of information does not go well for Democrats.
No, I think that's actually a really important point that we haven't brought up yet, and that is the Democratic Party used to always be able to depend on a couple of things. One, they had a massive federal bureaucracy that was supportive. Two, and this is something Doge uncovered, billions of dollars were floating into NGOs that were then going back to Democrats in the form of, political contributions. Mm-hmm. Right? When you defund Planned Parenthood for a year, you don't just defund Planned Parenthood from going out and killing babies. You defund an organization that gives tens of millions of dollars to Democrat candidates. And so what ends up happening is a big part of the federal budget was getting rerouted. I don't mean a big part as compared to the entire budget. I just mean hundreds of millions of dollars were getting funneled into left-wing NGOs that were essentially doing, again, it was like, oh, we're a get out the vote, or we're going to go register voters. Yeah, and they only registered voters in deep blue districts, right?
Like a big old money laundering scheme.
Yeah, we're going to do voter education. Well, they only did voter education on left-wing issues and left-wing places. Oh, well, we're going to go do environmental policy. Well, what did they do? They ended up advocating for, so they ended up, there was this whole campaign wing of the federal government that was essentially working almost unilaterally for Democrats. That has really been cut into.
And take a guess at what has happened since that flow of money has been shut off.
Can I just say right now, running as a Republican, there was something every single year I've ran, we always ran, like it was a joke. We always say, hey guys, we know we're going to get outspent. We just can't get outspent 2-1, or we just can't get outspent 3-1. Like we always went into every single race knowing, like as the Republican caucus, right, that we were going to get outspent significantly. But if we could keep it under 2-1, we could probably win. And so it's always been this foregone conclusion. Yeah, they're going to raise more money, but if we can close the gap, we got this. What's going on this time?
Oh, how the turntables.
The Michael Scott. Love it.
Yeah, so here's an article from New York Post. Top GOP campaign committees dominate Dems in 2025 fundraising. So here's some of the top line numbers here. The Republican National Committee has raked in almost $100 million in donations. It's headed by Michael Whately and Vice President J.D. Vance. And they have $80 million cash on hand, according to the latest FEC filings. That's a Federal Election Commission.
Yeah.
The Democratic National Committee, which is currently headed by Ken Martin. We did a podcast where we talked about him when he came into office earlier this year. Well, they have $69 million and a war chest of only $15 million. So the Democratic Party is broke on the national level, basically. They're bringing in fewer dollars than the Republicans
I've never
currently.
seen numbers like that.
Me neither.
It's
And
usually the opposite.
The war chest disparity of 80 million cash on hand versus 15 million cash on hand is just simply astonishing. So if this money is deployed wisely, which, obviously there's always a huge if on that, because we know how Republican campaign consultants love to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But if this money is spent wisely, this should give us at least a bit of an edge in some key races in the 2026 midterms. So this is going in our favor. There's another thing that I think is going in our favor, which is that you were bringing up earlier some of the stuff that the Democratic Party does in terms of process, right? They're really obsessed with critical theory, even if they don't understand all this stuff, right? All the philosophy behind it. They're enthralled with critical theory. They're enthralled with postmodernism. But those are all processes. Those aren't really end states.
Yeah.
I struggled for for just myself, let alone looking around. I think that most people, including most Democrats, would struggle to articulate what is it that the Democratic Party believes in, stands for, wants to fight for, aside from we hate Trump, we hate men, we hate white people, we hate America, and we want infinite debt, zero industrial capacity, and open borders. Like, we just want to dissolve everything and everybody just be, living in some entropic soup, and the government just feeds them all with welfare checks. Like, there is no cohesive ideology there aside from we hate certain groups in society. And you know what? Some of those groups hate them back.
Gen Z political affiliation among men. Republicans 52%, Democratic 34%. That's an 18-point difference.
This is Zoomers, the generation younger than me. So this is like 18 to 29-year-olds, men. This is unprecedented. I mean, we've talked at length about this, but it's really starting to be baked in at this point that, there was this poll that came out recently where people like David Hogg and stuff like that, some other individuals that are Zoomers within the Democratic Party were like, oh yeah, we're winning back the youth vote, because it showed that there was a poll out recently. It might have been from Quinnipiac, I can't remember, but it showed that something like 77% of Zoomers disapprove of Donald Trump's presidency. And so they were like, spiking the football basically. And a lot of people were like quote tweeting them and being like, no, you don't understand. You're in danger.
Yeah. They don't think Trump's gone far enough.
It's like there's this meme, the Star Wars meme of like Anakin and Padme. Have you ever seen that? It's from episode 2 where they're sitting in like a meadow somewhere. Yeah. And
so you mean...
And Anakin says something, and then Padme's like, so you mean yada yada, right? And then Anakin just looks at her, and it's like the dark side type look.
This works a whole lot better if you actually have a meme to work with here.
Well, I'm just thinking about it right now. Give me a minute, maybe I'll pull it up.
Can I ask a question? Because somebody said, now let's see women. And here's the thing is those poll numbers are pretty much... Okay, that's
it. This is it right here. So... like, this meme has been used over and over again with stuff like this, where people will say things like, they'll post this meme and the caption will be like, I strongly disagree with Donald Trump's presidency. Yeah. And then the left-wing take is, oh, because you think he's gone too far, right? And it's just like,
right? Yeah. Go back to that poll real quick, because somebody said, now let's see women.
Yeah. And I wanted to make a point there.
If you give me a second, I'll pull that up for you guys.
Yeah. Okay. So what you see in the women side of it too is women are pretty much flipped, right? But aren't the Gen Z women also moving to the right? They're not on the right, but they are moving that direction along with the males. Not as far, obviously.
So here's the polling, and no, Gen Z women have just gone insane.
No, what I mean is in comparison to the previous.
Here's the thing that you have to look at.
In comparison to millennials.
No, I'm gonna explain something real quick, because the problem whenever you're talking about Gen Z is that you're talking about it's like Gen X, right? Older Gen X and younger Gen X are kind of different, right? Like your older Gen Xers are a little bit more like boomers, and your younger Gen X's that's why they call like the Zennials or whatever, where
that's what I am. I'm the youngest of the millennials. I'm the youngest of the millennials. I'm not a Zoomer. I'm a millennial.
All right. So anyways, what I am is I'm the youngest of Gen X. So there was this portion of people born in the late 70s, early 80s that kind of have its own culture, where it has Gen X tendencies with respect to our overall attitude toward reality, but then we're comfortable with technology because we were teenagers when it was coming into existence. The same thing is true here. Like when you look at Gen Z men as a whole, 52% Republican, 34% Democrat. When you look at Gen Z women, 58% Democrat, 37% Republican. And so it's clear, and we've seen this reflected in everything, where women are going more liberal than they've ever gone before, and men are going more conservative than they've ever gone before. Now, what's interesting was when you look at who voted which way for Trump, and they broke it down into 4 categories. So it wasn't just men and women. They broke it down into 4 categories, and it was minority women, minority men, white women, white men. White men were the most conservative group, right? And I'm sorry, let me break this down further. Under the age of 20. That's an important component of this, right? Under the age of 20, white men overwhelmingly for Trump, like more conservative than we've tracked in like decades. White women voted for Trump, right? Young white women voted for Trump, right? Minority men voted for Trump. Minority women overwhelmingly Democrat. And so that's one of the things when you take into consideration. Now, if you look at all of Gen Z, yes, it's generally skewed. When you start breaking down the numbers a little bit more granularly, that's where you start to see that, okay, well, there's even a divide among women within Gen Z, and the younger women in Gen Z, if younger white women are starting to break more conservative, and minority women are still very, very much like almost unilaterally, and
they haven't really shifted a whole lot.
No, there's been very
at all.
Very
it's been mostly men. It's been largely men that have shifted hard to the right, and you see it like here in the polling. So this is the bigger breakdown from Pew Research this came out just a couple days ago.
What's interesting is they don't necessarily on the 18 to 29 year olds. If you look at there's like a disparity between left and right, because there's like a swath of people that aren't considering themselves necessarily on the right, but they definitely don't consider themselves the left. Like they won't put themselves in either camp. Whereas over like in the older generations, like millennial and everybody else, it doesn't quite fit like that.
You know what's interesting about this poll is that the Zoomer men are more right wing than the millennial men.
Yeah.
Which again is indicative of what I'm trying to get at here. I don't think that the Democratic Party realizes that they have made generational enemies at this point.
Well, and if we want to, I think that's a very good way to put it. I think the other thing too that do me real quick, look, Google real quick, the person that the Democratic National Committee spent $20 million on, because they said, look, we've got a problem with young men. We're having a problem we're bleeding young men. We need to get young men back into the party. And so they spent all this money doing this analysis. And we read off like the verbiage. The verbiage made it sound like they were explorers, scientific explorers, analyzing a jungle tribe. Like, what makes this particular culture tick? And they're just talking about young American men. And so they said, well, we've got to figure out how to reach out to these young American men. And let's see who they put in charge of that process for reaching out to young American men. Do you have her picture? Picture?
Okay.
That's what I want to see. Yeah.
I know her.
I want to show you who the Democrat Party thought would be a wonderful ambassador to young men to try to figure out why they're no longer interested in becoming openly hostile to the Democratic Party. We'll go to, it was Olivia.
It's like Olivia or Oliviana. I can't remember, and her last name starts with a J, but it's
If I find this before you, you're gonna be. I mean, I'm gonna be like, what the heck, man? Okay. Yeah, Democrat. But anyways, they picked this person who is obviously a very far left wing progressive female, right? Young female, and that was the person that they put in charge of like their outreach to men. And it wasn't something.
It's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah. Here you go. This is who they put in charge of reaching out to young men. And she went on like on all these left wing podcasts, and she's like, "Well, I love frat boys. I'm going to do a great job speaking with all these like college age men." First off, I don't even need to say it. Why on earth are you going to put a woman in charge of reaching out and speaking to young men and bringing them on board? Like
every single poll out there,
because women know everything in the Democratic
How
Party.
Women can do everything that men can do.
Well, and you would see her
speaking to them better than
you would see her go onto podcasts, and she'd be going on podcasts with these like liberal men, and it was painful to watch. Like as someone, for instance, if they really wanted to do a good job of this, who's that one? Is it Galloway?
Scott Galloway.
Scott Galloway. Yeah. If they really wanted to go to someone who's on the left and talk to them about, hey, how do we appeal to young men right now? They would have gone to Scott Galloway. And again, I find Scott Galloway frustrating because I feel like he understands part of the problem, but he understands the problem just enough to get the messaging right, not to actually fix the policies. That's my problem with Scott Galloway. But he's a smart guy, and he doesn't buy into a lot of the crap that the left is pushing. He actually did a really interesting interview with Jake Tapper on this, where they were talking about the problem. And again, he would have been good enough to get your messaging better. But no, they and this is the part where, again, when we say that I don't think they've learned it, it's who in their right mind would have picked her to be the outreach person? Who? Like, imagine that in reverse. Oh my gosh, we're really bleeding young, women voters. They're no longer coming in voting for us. Like they're just gone. How do we reach out to them? Oh, I know. We're gonna pick Andrew Tate to go and appeal to young women voters in America. Like, everybody would know, to include Andrew Tate, that's stupid, right? Like that's not who your spokesman is going to be if you're trying to reach people with a different perspective and potentially warm them to your way of thinking about particular ideas. That's not who you would pick to appeal to young liberal women, right? But that's what they did. They picked a young liberal woman to appeal to conservative men. And once again, we got lectured at, right? It's like, or they got lectured at. They're like, oh, this didn't work. And so they eventually shut it down, but not before they were dedicated. I don't know how much money they actually burned through.
Oh, they spent $20 million studying
they
the
dedicated
problem.
$20 million. Is that how much they actually spent?
They spent $20 million building some. In fact, actually,
I don't think $20 million was just for the study. I think it was $20 million. Study was a part of it, and then the outreach was a part of it.
Obviously, we're not going to go through this whole thing.
Yeah.
But I'll bring it up so that way the audience, if they want to take a look, they can. This is the thing that Democrats put together. They called it SAM, Speaking with American Men. It's almost like they're treating them like an alien species that they're studying, and it's natural and
well, that's what I was saying. It was like they're going into the Amazon to talk to a tribe that had never been contacted.
So this was their strategic plan. They went through, here's what they think about work, the Democratic Party, housing, the future. They talked about the huge shift. They shifted 12 points to the right, which again, that's double the national average from 2024. And then they did all of this, like they spent millions of dollars trying to understand, where do they get their news from? I'll tell you right now, they get their news from YouTube, Discord, Twitter, online spaces. They don't watch. Sorry. I still call it Twitter. They don't watch Fox. They don't watch MSNBC. They don't watch they don't read the New York Times. They don't listen to NPR. Like, these are the type of thing, obviously with the exception of Fox, these are the type of things that liberals listen to. Young men, like under the age of 30, they don't listen to or watch any like old traditional media, but they needed to spend millions of dollars studying that. I could have just told you. I have a brother who he hasn't watched TV in years. He's a few years younger than me. He's 10 years younger than me. Yeah. And so he's exactly in that age cohort. Yeah. And it's just incredible that the Democratic Party needed to spend millions of dollars to figure out, like, what content do they consume? Well, why don't you just ask your sons? Like, Jake Tapper talked about this when he did this interview with Scott Galloway, where he was like, my son...
he said something funny.
It was like...
he didn't realize how funny it was.
My son wants to be a cop, and all that he cares about is he just wants to help people, and he's really into football, the police, and World War II. and the Democratic Party treats him like the enemy, and then I just wonder, well, this is why you effers, he dropped an expletive, and he's like, this is why you effers keep losing, because you hate these people. And then you and I listened to this, and we were like, Jake, I've got some news for
bad
you.
News, buddy.
Who's gonna tell him?
Yeah.
As soon as he said, my son likes World War II, I immediately knew. I'm like,
yeah, like, well, so, and now again, let's look at a couple of Democrats that do seem to have gotten it right. Scott Galloway seems to get something. Jake Tapper seems to have some recognition of what's going on. Gavin Newsom is another one who he is recognized. One of the critiques that he was getting is he was kind of going through and trying to figure out what went wrong. Charlie Kirk told this to him, I think it was. He goes, you guys are not willing to sit down in long-form conversation. You're not willing to do it because it never works in your favor. So Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Vivek, they're going around during the last presidential campaign.
Multi-hour-long
interviews where you don't get the questions ahead of time, no script, no nothing. We showed something the other day where the Jubilee are the people that run this program where it's 1 against 20. And they were saying, well, you always have conservatives on there. It's always a conservative message. Like, you need to be more liberal. And he goes, we agree the left won't come on. Like, it's really hard.
They're starting to try to drag some people.
Starting to try to do it. He goes, but the left always says, oh, we're not sure. Can we get the questions ahead of time? Can we do all this other stuff? Right. And so Newsom has been trying to work his way into this. And what ends up happening is he goes on a place like Sean Ryan, and Sean Ryan is not an in-your-face interviewer, right? Sean Ryan asks very genuine questions. He may give you some pushback. He may ask you some hard questions, but he's not there to do gotcha stuff, right?
He's very similar to Joe Rogan in that respect.
Yeah, and again, even Gavin Newsom, who's very, very polished as a candidate, right? Gavin Newsom goes on there, and it's like, dude, you end up looking like the clips that get cut and sent out are never in their favor. And so there is this problem, but from the overall, and I'm going to let you finish us out with this, but from the overall Democrat perspective, when you look at who they're trying to appeal to and trying to get their messaging right and trying to get leadership, and that's why Gavin Newsom is doing this. He wants to be the leader of this new Democratic Party that is able to message Democrat policies out to a broader and diverse audience and to all the people that they're losing. And what they're finding out is that the places they have to go to do this and the internal questions that they have to ask, it's going to require them to actually be brave enough to go in for unscripted long-form interviews. Good luck, right? It's going to require them to actually reach out to demographics that they haven't just ignored. They have built a base around actively attacking this group of people that they're now trying to bring in. And you're going to have a hard time appealing to those people without, one, convincing them that you're just a fraud. You don't really care about me. You just care about my vote. And two, how do you genuinely reach out to those people without alienating this base you've created around hating these people? That's a contradiction, right? So all of this is going on at the same time where now they don't have the same power. Tina, you brought this up earlier. They don't have the same power of the mainstream media because the voters that they need to reach out to don't watch the mainstream media. They don't have the same power of Hollywood, not because Hollywood is in their camp, but because I would rather watch Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, or Disparu talk about a Hollywood movie than actually pay the money to go see it in the theaters, right? So they have and they can't count on USAID, Planned Parenthood, and all these other groups to get billions of my tax dollars to then fund the NGOs that push their ideological narrative and then donate to Democrat campaigns. So they are running leadership issues, messaging issues, cohesion issues, funding issues. Dude, that is politics.
There's one last issue that they have, which is geography. So I've got up right now on
wait 1 second. You were gonna
No, let's move on.
I've got up here a map of the 2026 senatorial map. I've got news. The Democrats are not flipping the U.S. Senate next year.
No,
it would almost certainly require, I mean, if you just bear with me for a second, it would require them flipping North Carolina, holding Georgia, flipping Maine, and even then, Even if they hold the open seat in Michigan, they're at 49. Where are they getting their 50th seat from?
Yeah,
let alone their 51st seat
they're
from?
They're not getting it from Tennessee,
Are they going to flip
Alabama?
Florida, which voted 13 points for Donald Trump? Yeah. How about Texas, which also voted 13, I think even 14 points for Donald Trump? Maybe they're going to get Iowa or Ohio, which voted also north of 10 points. Like Ohio and Iowa voted for Obama twice. They're safe red states at this point.
Yeah. No, I don't see, this is, like you said.
Do you see Republicans picking up any of those seats instead?
Their best shot is flipping either Michigan or Georgia, but most likely, and we'll get to this, I mean, because it's a midterm cycle, they're going to be at it. I would be shocked if Republicans flip a single Senate seat. They're probably going to lose one of North Carolina or Maine is my guess, but North Carolina is very inelastic, and now it's an open seat. Roy Cooper is going to run, and he's going to be a strong candidate for the Democrats, so that's probably their best shot at flipping a Republican-held seat.
Yeah.
I don't know if Republicans are going to be able to flip Michigan or Georgia, but I'll tell you this. The Democratic Party's messaging is not suited for the type of electorates that vote in senatorial elections, because you know where their voters are. Their voters are here in New York City, they're here in Los Angeles, they're here in San Francisco, and lo and behold, these states don't even have elections for U.S. Senate this year. And even if they did, it wouldn't matter because the Democrats already control all these seats
It's
anyway.
already baked in.
It's already baked in. So
this is a question of what can be flipped in the Senate and the odds of them flipping the Senate. Well,
in terms of geography, what I'm trying to get at is that the Democratic Party's base is overwhelmingly concentrated in just a small handful of urban, affluent coastal centers. They're in Boston, they're in New York City, and New York City is actually zooming to the right, but certainly the suburbs around it have gotten bluer. They're in Washington, D.C., which is not too far from here. They're in San Francisco, L.A., Seattle, Chicago. I can keep going on, but guess what? That limits them to just a handful of states that are safe blue states.
Here's a question real quick from Random Mule. Question: will Newsom have the same vote splitting effects as Elon?
No, if Newsom runs as a Democrat, he'll win Democrats.
Yeah.
But if Elon supports third-party candidates, he'll be polling most likely from us more than the Democrats. And so that's the problem. I mean, we did a whole podcast about that.
Yeah.
I don't think that Elon's third-party venture is going to work simply because the United States has effectively always been a two-party system.
Yeah. Another question from Jacob. Why do you think we won't flip New Hampshire in the Senate?
Because New Hampshire has not elected a Republican to the Senate in a very long time.
Yeah, New Hampshire's a really interesting use case. When you look at their state legislature, you actually, again, they're like the fourth or fifth largest legislature in the world, right? Like it's after the United States Congress, like India, so I forget what it is, but they have, I represent 80,000 people in the Virginia House of Delegates.
They represent like 3,000.
It's minuscule. So there's a lot of members.
New Hampshire's
there.
Quirky in that they have a habit of electing Republicans to the state legislature, but then they vote blue in federal elections.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have any reason to currently believe that that's going to change anytime soon. They might pick up a U.S. House seat. We might in New Hampshire, especially if the Republicans in the legislature redraw the boundaries to favor us.
We've kind of laid out the issues with the Democrats right now, and if you're looking at this from the Democrat perspective, they've really got it. They've got a lot of work to do, and I can't remember a time in my lifetime where at a fundamental level they were this bad off. And when I say fundamental, I mean no matter what elections,
no leadership, no messaging, no money, awful geographic disposition.
Yeah, there have been times where there was the wind was at the back for Republicans and Democrats were probably going to lose, but that didn't mean Republicans were raising more money. It didn't mean that Republicans had better access with respect to the media and the control of information. It didn't mean that Democrats had lost all this funding from either NGOs or Planned Parenthood. It didn't mean any of that. It just meant that the circumstances on the ground favored Republicans for that particular year. But the fundamental infrastructure of the Democratic Party was still relatively strong. It just might not have been strong enough for that year under those conditions. This is different. Like their fundamentals are really hurting right now. And again, if you live in certain states, you're not even going to really notice this, right? Like you're still going to get the results that you would typically expect.
Yeah, if you're in Oregon, you don't
really catch this. It is what it is, right? But overall, there is something different that's happening here. Now, let's shift over and try to take a look at this from the Republican perspective, because just because the Democrats are in a bad spot doesn't mean Republicans are batting 1,000. So let's do kind of a hard look at some of the same narratives.
Yeah, so we started hinting at that when we talked about the fundraising edge, but there's another edge that Republicans have right now. Although on paper it's going to look like a disadvantage, but I'll explain in a moment. So this is the this is the 2026 generic ballot polling right now. This is from Real Clear Politics. And so when you look at this, right now it's D+3. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Christian, you just said that Republicans have an edge right now, but I'm looking at a D+3 environment. How on earth is that favorable to Republicans? Because you need to compare it. And anytime somebody says something like this, you need to ask yourself, compared to what?
Yeah.
This is where we were in 2018.
Yeah.
It was much, much worse. In 2018, we ended Election Day with a Real Clear Politics average of D+7.3, and the actual election results were D+8, almost 8.5.
Yeah. The polls actually
understated Democrats by points.
Yeah.
And where we were a year out before the election is even crazier. So in July of 2017, exactly basically this point in time in the middle of the 2018 midterm cycle, Democrats were polling at +8.
Yeah.
Right? In late July. It jumped up right here. It was hovering from about +7 to +8. Well, that's basically in line with what the final results were. So what's interesting is that in July 2017, the polling was basically spot on with what the final result was going to be more than 12 months out. Well, if that pattern held, and obviously there's no guarantee that it will.
No.
But if that pattern held, well, then you're looking at basically a D+3 environment. That might not be enough for the Democrats to actually, that's certainly not going to be enough for them to flip the Senate. Like, period, the end.
I don't
that might not even be enough for them to flip the House. That might be on like a razor's edge. And the reason for this is because Republicans have an ace up their sleeve, which is called the great state of Texas. So I've got this news article that I want to show you guys. Texas Republicans aim to redraw House districts at Trump's urging, but there's a risk. Spoiler alert. There's no risk. There's no risk.
Unless Newsom decides to do the same thing in California.
AP has visited the Donald Trump-run McDonald's and has picked up a big bag of McCope.
Yeah.
Because there is no risk to this. So their article, they go on and they're like, Democrats in the Rio Grande Valley are optimistic that you're just going to redraw the borders, but that means you're going to shift Democrat votes into these districts that are now going to become competitive. Yeah, that's what gerrymandering is. You've just described gerrymandering.
Yeah.
This idea that the Republicans are going to draw some sort of dummy mander and then Democrats are going to pick up a bunch of seats in like rural central Texas is not what's going to happen, in large part because the entire Rio Grande Valley shifted like 40 points to the right from 2016 to 2024. That train doesn't have any brakes to it. That's not going to slow down.
Yeah.
So guys like Vicente Gonzalez are a dying breed. They remind me so much of these like Southern Democrats in like rural Alabama in the 1990s that were still hanging on.
Yeah.
They didn't really get the memo that it was time for them to exit stage left.
Yeah.
And so like this AP article, like I said, it's just pure cope. What they're getting to is that Donald Trump called up Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and he said, I want you to redraw the state's congressional maps. For those who don't know, every 10 years, there's a census that's done. That census reallocates congressional seats to each state. And there's a total of 435 seats in the House of Representatives. And you get seats based on population.
Yeah.
When that happens, those states then redraw congressional boundaries. So, for example, we live in Virginia's 7th district, but the borders of the 7th district shifted massively after the census.
Yeah,
it went from the Richmond suburbs up to now Prince William County, which is part of Northern Virginia. That's just to the north of us. We're still in it. Our little corner stayed the same, but the rest of the district is different. Well, it's the same with every state in the country. But what's interesting is that some states, depends on their laws and constitutions, but some states, you get these independent commissions that draw them. Spoiler alert, also, there's no such thing as an independent commission. Other states, it's just the legislature that draws the map. Well, take a guess who controls the legislature in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the Democratic Party that controls the legislature in Texas. So the Republicans drew a map that benefited Republicans. But guess what also happened since 2020? Texas got much redder since 2020, right? Trump won Texas by barely 5 in 2020, and then he wins it by double digits in 2024. So when you now look at the House of Representatives map, The map that I have up here is all the congressional seats. This is on 270towin.com. This is kind of the consensus take on how likely each party is to win a bunch of seats. So you have a bunch of seats that are toss-ups, like in Arizona and Michigan.
Central California.
Yeah. And you've got one here in South Texas. If you allow me to pull up the Texas map, though, I'll show you exactly what I mean by there being an advantage. So Republicans currently have drawn a map where Democrats have north of 10 seats that are just theirs safe.
Yeah.
They've got 3 in the Dallas suburbs. Dallas metro area.
Like, we don't even got to look. It's Dallas, Austin, Houston, and El Paso, and San Antonio,
and South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley. They've got a couple seats down. They currently hold this seat and this seat.
Yeah.
And Republicans have this seat right here in the middle.
Yeah.
And so Republicans are drawing a map right now. They're in the process of beginning this, where they're almost certainly going to end up flipping these seats. They're going to flip the 28th district in South Texas, the 34th. They're going to flip one of these 3 seats in Dallas, and they're going to flip 1 seat in Houston at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
That's 4 seats. What they're really trying to go for is 6. They're probably going to try to pick off either the El Paso seat or one in the central Texas area, like this one that runs from San Antonio to Austin.
Yeah.
And that's going to require redrawing almost the whole map, but they have the potential to flip 4 to 6 seats in just Texas alone.
Yeah.
And when you look at the nationwide situation, well,
and by the way, some people are obviously going to say, well, this is unethical. What we're talking about right now is not the dangers or the problems with the redistricting or gerrymandering. We're talking right now is what's going to happen or what could potentially happen.
This is almost certainly going to happen.
Because I'll tell you exactly what happens every time this issue comes up is whoever is out of power complains incessantly about gerrymandering. The moment they're in power, they're no longer concerned about gerrymandering. How do I know this? When Republicans controlled the state legislature in Virginia, the Democrats talked incessantly about the problems with gerrymandering and how we needed an independent commission. And so you know what we did? We worked out a compromise. And the compromise wasn't a total independent commission, and then all of a sudden, you know what happened? Democrats won the House before we did this policy. And so all of a sudden, the same Democrats have been screaming for years about, we have to have this commission. We can't have legislators drawing their own districts. The moment they got into power, all of a sudden, we don't really need this commission. Now, there were about 7 Democrats that said, look, I campaigned on this. I have to vote for it. And so we ended up with the commission, but they got excoriated by their own side. So the only thing I want to point out is this is one of those areas where Republican, Democrat, don't care who you are. Nobody's honest about this. Nobody's honest about this.
And then when the commission is basically at an impasse where they can't figure out which way they want to go with it, what happens? A judge just goes ahead and draws the line. A Democrat appointed judge.
Yeah. Well, so the point I want to bring out is, like, we're not talking about the moral foibles of gerrymander. We can all recognize the problems. But it is what it is, and anybody that claims to be pure on this is probably full of crap. No party is pure on it. Individuals are, but no party.
For the Republican perspective, it's not just Texas, though.
Yeah.
So they want to pick up 4 to 6 seats in Texas, but that's not the only state where they can do this and redraw the maps in the middle of the decade. Because remember what I said, traditionally you draw it after a census.
Yeah.
But some of these states, they have the legal ability, they can draw them tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so Trump has also reached out to Ohio and Missouri to do the same thing. Missouri has a seat in the Kansas City area that I'll show you. There's 2 Democrat-held seats on either end of the state, one in St. Louis, which is going to be a safe Democrat vote sink no matter what, and the other one's in the Kansas City metro area. And Missouri is a safe enough red state that, I mean, Missouri is almost like a 60-40 state.
Yeah.
It is absolutely possible for Republicans to draw a 7-1 map and flip this district and have it like go out into, again, pick up some rural parts of Missouri, crack there's 2 methods in gerrymandering. One is called cracking and the other one is called packing.
Yeah.
So what you do as a Republican in a state like Missouri is you will pack as many Democrat voters into St. Louis as possible.
Yeah.
And make that a safe, 80% Democrat vote sink. And then in Kansas City, it's very blue, but it's not blue enough that it always has to be
you could add
a
enough
safe
rural.
district.
You could add enough rural area. So what you do
You
is
can have two districts going into Kansas City together to crack it.
The packing is making like a D or R plus 90 district. The cracking is you break up a couple of like R plus 30 districts and you turn them into R plus 10 districts, but then you pick up now a third district that's R plus 3. Or R plus 2.
Or even more than that. Maybe they'll all be, and let's say that you had two districts that were R plus 15 and one district that was, D plus 15. Well, if you combine them all together, maybe you'll get all three of them being R plus 10 instead.
Yeah.
And then they'd still be all safe.
I feel like packing, there is
I'm just throwing out, by the way, that math might not work.
I feel like there's nothing ethically wrong with packing because if you live in a tight-knit area that is, and everybody's of the same mindset as you, there's no reason to pull people from a rural area in to be voters in this urban area. It makes sense to keep them all together because they all have the same mindset in the big cities. Just keep them together.
There's one more state. Technically, there's actually a couple more bonus rounds that I'll give you, but there's one more state where this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And this is Ohio, where the same situation's in play. Republicans have a legal mechanism to basically game the system and sidestep the redistricting commission that they have and draw the lines themselves. They have a total legal, this is not in dispute. They have the legal ability to do this.
Yeah.
It just takes them time to go through the process. And currently, Democrats have 5 seats in a state that they lost in a landslide. They have one in Columbus. They have one in Cleveland. They have one in Cincinnati. And then they have one in Toledo and Akron.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, I got that mixed up. This is Akron and this is Toledo.
Yeah.
Republicans are going to end up flipping
Toledo and
the
Akron.
Lake one, the Toledo and Akron one, and they're going to try to do the same cracking situation in Cincinnati.
I'm less confident in their ability to
Now,
do that.
they're going to get 2. They're going to try to go for 3.
Yeah.
But they're definitely going to get 2.
Well, the issue...
But here's what's interesting. If they pull that off, now look at the nation.
Yeah.
If they pull off the Missouri, Texas, and Ohio situations, look at the numbers here. You notice anything interesting about this?
Yeah, 218.
That's an absolute majority of the House of Representatives right there, without any swing districts accounted for at all. And a lot of these swing districts, like even if it's a bad environment, we're probably not going to lose every single one of them.
I want to say there's something like, I think, 7 Democrat seats that Trump won?
I don't know if it's exactly 7, but there's more. Let's put it like this. There are more Democrat-held seats that Trump won than Republican-held seats that Harris won, which is another geographic advantage from the Republican perspective that is giving us an edge going into the midterm. This is why I said I'm not nearly as worried about this D+3 ballot, especially when I consider where we were in 2017.
Yeah.
Because of the geography.
Well, the other thing too, so from again, what we looked at with the Democrats was the idea of messaging, fundraising, leadership, cohesion within the party. We'll do the same thing with the Republicans right now. So from a geographical standpoint, Democrats are at a disadvantage. Republicans have an advantage this time around. From a fundraising perspective, Republicans have an advantage, which we're never used to having it. I'm not even sure how we're going to, and again, it concerns me a little bit because we do have some issues with consultants in the Republican Party. But there's no question you want to be in a superior fundraising position. And it's theoretically one that is not just, again, we should not be outraising the Democrats in a midterm election with our, but we are. And I think, again, some of that has to do with some of the adjustments that took place within the federal government as well as other areas. But when it comes to leadership, nobody's confused. Like Trump, don't like Trump. Now, again, people can make the argument, whenever you do have a leader that everyone recognizes, so goes the leader, so goes you. The one issue right now that is kind of hindering Trump a little bit, and I've always been curious on how it's going to do it. Like at first, people were, the foreign policy perspective. So the strike in Iran, you actually saw this really big pushback from everyone, from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Tucker Carlson to everyone to Candace Owens, really pushing back on Donald Trump. Like they went hard on it. I think they oversold their hand. Their hand was, oh my gosh, now we're getting into World War III.
Dave Smith called for his impeachment.
Oh, yeah. I can't. They're all, and then the whole Israel thing came into it, and the whole. And what happened? Well, okay, there was a couple of strategic strikes. Iran immediately came to the table. It's not over yet, right? This is a problematic area, but yeah, it wasn't World War III and it wasn't tens of thousands of American troops dying in combat, which they were all predicting that the best case scenario was thousands of Americans will die. Well, none died, right? And so what it did is I think they went so hard on that. In part, I think they went so hard because they were trying to push Trump in a different direction, but they went so hard in it that they lost credibility. They lost some. There was the whole what Trump calls the panicans, right? Don't be a panican. And now there's also this issue with Ukraine, right? Because Putin has been trying to play this game where he's trying to engage in a little bit of brinksmanship with Trump and figuring out like what can Trump actually get away with and can he actually assist Ukraine? Or I also don't think that's going to work out the way that people think, because Trump has actually done a really good job on foreign policy. He doesn't get us involved in big time conflicts. He doesn't deploy massive amounts of U.S. troops for nation building operations. He understands the value of a punitive expedition. So again, what are the areas that could potentially hurt Trump? The foreign policy one was a part of that. The other one was the Epstein files. The Epstein files, where even people that are very, very loyal to Trump, like I consider myself very, very, I voted for Trump enthusiastically. I've been a supporter of the administration. By the same token, I've been willing to speak up when I think something is wrong, right? Like I was very frustrated with raising the debt ceiling in the big, beautiful bill, and I wasn't willing to go all out for, no, everyone get on board. Like I understood why people were frustrated. The Epstein files, I've said before, like, look, I'm willing to give the Trump administration time to work on this. I'm not willing to be told this is fake. Now, by the same token, I think some of the messaging on the Epstein files was horrible by the Trump administration, and it did alienate a lot of Republicans and Trump supporters, but it didn't alienate them to the degree of, I think, like ditching the party, right? The people that immediately said, impeach the president, these were people that they were never really like hardcore, in my opinion. Most of the ones that I've seen, they were never people that were like hardcore Trump supporters. They were people that were along for the ride and they had high hopes for certain things. But if you go from, I supported Donald Trump, to he needs to be impeached because he did a surgical strike on an Iranian nuclear facility. I question whether or not there was any sort of like deep-seated support there, right? Same thing that you see with some of these other issues. Now, Epstein files are different on some level, but the question is if you're a Republican or if you're a Trump supporter and you're showing up to vote, are you going to vote Democrat over the Epstein files? And if the answer is yes, it's like, okay, well, the Democrats had full control of the Epstein files for 4 years. Why didn't they release any of it? Why were there no prosecutions? Why did they, I don't see that as a transition. Now, you could have a situation where people that voted for Trump before don't vote for him next time. But that doesn't translate into Democrat votes. That is going to, so I think overall Trump's control over kind of leadership of the Republican Party and maintaining loyalty has been pretty good. There's one other issue that I will bring up right now that most people don't share with me, but I'm frustrated by it. I think spending millions of dollars going after Thomas Massie is an absolute, complete, and total waste of money. I have a real problem with this idea that we're gonna run Thomas Massie over the coals because he wouldn't vote for the big, beautiful bill, but we're gonna give guys like Lindsey Graham a pass. I have a problem with that. There's going to be certain elements within the Republican Party but am I voting Democrat in the No. As mad as I am about what's going on in the congressional district in Kentucky, I'm not abandoning, the Trump administration over it. I will talk out about it. I will fight back against it. I will say it's bad strategy. But that's where it's at. Now, there's a lot that could happen between now and election day, but right now, as I look at the things on the horizon that would cause division within the Republican Party or a challenge to Trump's leadership, I don't see it. I mean, am I missing something here?
No, I think that the Republican Party is relatively united, even with all the they're not really scandals, but with all the stories that you've brought up, all the examples, even with that all aside, I mean, polling shows that Republicans themselves give Donald Trump like a 95+% approval rating.
Yeah, I think
even after everything that's happened, and that's kind of proof that to some degree the internet can sometimes be divorced from reality.
I also think what you might end up seeing with this, provided that things kind of like, barring any major new scandal or development, right? I think with a lot of the people too, where they say, Trump's approval rating is -7 right now. I think there's something of a Giuliani effect going on, where there was this joke in New York where if you talk to people on the street about Giuliani, it was like, oh, I don't like that guy. He's too heavy-handed. but he kept winning elections, right? Why? Because while it was unpopular to talk about things like stop and frisk in New York City, people were happy that Times Square was no longer a drug-ridden, peep show place. It was actually places where you saw industry and you could bring your family and everything. So it's one of those things where when people show up to the cocktail party, they say one thing. When they go into the ballot box, they do something different. And I think you could see, again, the people that love Trump and love his personality and love the bravado are all in for it. They love it. There's a lot of other people that like his policies that have never been perfectly comfortable with Trump's persona. And so whenever something happens that they can signal to other people, either genuine concern or just to say, hey, I voted for him, but I get your point. I wish he hadn't done that, or I wish he hadn't done that. That is not translating into, I'm now giving thousands of dollars to, Democrat candidates and I'm not trying to virtue signal to the left so hard that I vote Democrat in the congressional election in order to oppose Trump. So that's why I say when it comes to cohesion within the Republican Party, you're always going to see Republicans getting in food fights. We do it for fun, right? We do it for fun. But I'm actually seeing more cohesion within the Republican Party around Trump than I've seen for any other Republican candidate. Is that fair? Or
no, I think that's correct. There's also been this vibe shift where things that were previously considered taboo or untouchable or just not even on the table, not even considered, have become mainstream almost. And it's the right is kind of rediscovering itself insofar as it's increasingly no longer interested in operating within the sort of metaphysical framework that the left has constructed and demanded that everybody operate within. Instead, it's questioning that framework and the legitimacy of it.
Yeah.
And, we've brought this up in some recent episodes. Sometimes that entails asking messy or uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe we'll get the wrong answer. But the mere fact that some messy, uncomfortable questions are being asked is indicative of the fact that Republicans have increasingly, I'm not saying we're there yet, by no means, but we have begun the process of kind of rebuilding ourselves and regaining the courage to say, no, I disagree with you. Mm-hmm. Not because I think it's efficient, because I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
On a moral level or an existential level, I think you're wrong. And I'm not going to accept the framing that you've put forward.
There's a certain degree of moral outrage that has finally taken root on the right. And again, I think a lot of it can be traced back to what the Democratic Party decided to do with kids. There's a certain degree of perfectly justifiable moral outrage at this idea that, you know what, I didn't care how you wanted to dress. I didn't care how you wanted to dress in public. The moment you decided to make this about kids and to put it into the viewership of kids, and then to tell me something was wrong with me if I had an issue with it, because remember the initial response to this was like, hey, look, guys, do what you want, whole deal. Just, keep it away from the kids. I just don't want this and this stuff. Oh, you're a bigot now? And then it was like, you know what? Not only am I not a bigot, you're a pervert, right? It wasn't, oh, look, live and live. No, you're a pervert. You're a pervert and this is wrong. Okay, that's a shift. That's a shift. And again, I think Democrats are struggling with this idea of, how do we get around this? But at the same time, they can't break away from it. So you not only see cohesion within the Republican Party with respect to, hey, we're willing to accept imperfect bills if it means we get some critical things done, right? I wanted you to defund Planned Parenthood, period. You did it for a year. Okay, I'll take it. But next year, we're bringing this up again, right? So there's that cohesion over there with we are getting stuff done. It not as much as we want. We're getting stuff done. And the Democrats can't seem to stop themselves from doubling down on the 20% issues. And so I think that cohesion is held together both by, first of all, they believe that Donald Trump really wants to do something and is willing to do it. He has demonstrated this on issues that were very important, because let's face it, most Republicans would have campaigned on immigration and then would have claimed we couldn't get anything significant done.
Oh, on that point, there's a couple Republicans that just quite frankly want to backstab us on this.
Yeah.
There's a handful of them that are pushing amnesty right now.
Well, look, and I live in a rural area. I have farmers coming up to me going, Nick, how are we supposed to bring in the crops, right? And it's like, okay, I get there's a problem here, but I'm sorry, this problem has gotten so bad that we need to find new ways to address that problem because the current one is not working, right? And so all that said, the question is always not, are you mad or are you perfect? The question is never, are you perfectly satisfied? The question is, how do you plan to vote? And I think the Republicans are actually in a fairly good position right now with cohesion, leadership, geography, fundraising. I mean,
this is why I think that 2026 is actually a fight rather than it's going to be a blowout defeat. It could still very well be.
Yeah.
Remember, we're trying to break a generational trend here of the party in the White House losing control of the House of Representatives and certainly losing seats.
Yeah.
Many cases, they don't even have control, right? But losing seats in the House of Representatives, going back to 2002 being the last year that did not take place. And so, well, there's plenty, to put it like this, there's voters alive today that will be casting a ballot in the midterm elections next year who have never lived to see the type of thing that we're trying to pull off.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, though, is it's easy to kind of look at the numbers and go, well, this has been the trend this whole time. But leading up to every single one of those elections, there was a climate which led to that.
Yeah.
And so we can't just look at the numbers in a vacuum and go, these are patterns that just always exist. No, there are things that led to that sentiment and that reasoning. And things are different now than they've been. And I've never seen a political climate the way it is right now.
I agree,
Ever. And so I know that we have a lot of patterns that we're looking at, but there is something that led that pattern to take place that leading up to the voting booth that caused people to vote that way. It's not just the numbers. They didn't just flip a switch and go, well, it's time to vote like this. It's that there were certain things that led to that. And that's the issue is we are looking at a pretty unprecedented time in our history. I mean, there are things that have happened the last couple of election cycles that we have never seen happen. You know,
I think it's fair.
So I do think that we can't just look at it as, okay, it's always gone this way, so we should be preparing for that. I think that things are a little different this time. We might see something different.
Well, Chris in the comments asked question, has there ever been this 80-20 issue problem in the past? And is there something that could lend itself to breaking the trend in 2026? And this goes into what Tina's saying is that when we say the 80-20 issues, what we're meaning is, most people, typically speaking, when you see political parties, they do all their polling and what they're looking for are what are the issues that people are most concerned about. And then they focus their messaging and their policy prescriptions toward those issues. Mm-hmm. And it's usually tabled. This was the whole, it's the economy stupid, right? That was the Bill Clinton thing in 1992.
Bill Clinton was a master at adjusting his message based on the mood of the people.
Yeah.
He like put his finger in the air and see which way the wind was blowing. And
this is also why Bill Clinton was one of the only Democrats to kind of warn that Trump was going to win in 2016 against his own wife. He was sounding... There's been stories about this that's come out in the year since that he was sounding the alarm bells in like late October that like, I don't think we're safe in Wisconsin and Michigan. And Hillary didn't even visit Wisconsin in that election. And look at what happened because Bill Clinton is such a gifted natural politician. We can hate him all we want, but he is a gifted natural politician.
Well, and he has populist tendencies as well. That's why
he knew the way the winds were blowing in that election.
But to Chris's question on this whole 80-20 point, the reason I'm saying this is that there's always issues that are 80-20. The question is, how much time do you spend on them? And smart people in politics don't spend time on 20% issues. They spend time on 80% issues. The problem is that the Democratic Party, with the identity politics, with the critical theory, with all this stuff, they didn't just create like policy positions. They created moral imperatives.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of this on something on the right. And it's not an 80-20 issue, but it could be in a particular district. So when I was running for Congress in 2020, I am adamantly pro-life. Pro-life is again, one of the things that would have motivated the Democrats against me more than anything was the abortion issue, because we knew young female voters voted overwhelmingly. Like if you asked them, young female voters, abortion was like their number one issue. you would see, to give you an idea, there's like a climate activist billionaire in Virginia that always gives money to Democrat candidates. A lot of the money that was coming from climate dollars or climate donors was funding abortion issues. And you'd be like, why? Because abortion was who got the climate activist elected, right? And so they looked at the polling, they picked the issue, and then they focused all their messaging around the issue that would win because they knew they'd get their other issue as well. Now, did I shy away from being pro-life when I ran in 2020? Nope. Why? Moral imperative. Moral imperative. The difference, though, with the left is that they have created moral imperatives around issues for which there is very little consensus. Very little consensus within the general population, but a huge amount of consensus within their own base. And that's where they're running in. That's where they're running into a major issue. And so, just like I will never give up on the life issue because I believe it's a genuine moral imperative and one that we have to fight for, they have created moral imperatives out of things that just shouldn't be. And for them to shy away from it now would look like complete betrayal, not just to an individual issue or voting demographic, but to an entire movement, right? Like, how do you justify Queers for Palestine? They literally throw homosexuals from buildings in Gaza. And yet, total moral imperative. You have to be on board with this. And so that, I think, is very, very unique in American politics. And it is a direct result of them creating kind of this alternate reality with respect to truth and morality. And so they're paying the price for it right now, and they're not quite sure how to. The ones that understand it's a problem are not quite sure how to engage. The ones that don't understand it's a problem will continue to double down and accuse anybody that even slightly tries to modify the message of being a total traitor to the cause, because they have to keep like absolute loyalty to these issues. And the left has typically been pretty good about keeping their people in line. I mean, I've had Democrat colleagues who you get in a private conversation with them and they're perfectly rational. And they never carry these bills. They understand it's kind of weird and dumb and not something that we should be doing, but it doesn't matter. Departing from it is treason and you will pay a price for it. So they just dutifully do what they're supposed to do. But yeah, so I hope that answers that question. I think what's happened. So I think what's happened in 2026 is you're going to see some Democrats that try to stray away from those 20% issues that the Democratic Party has hitched themselves to. But overall, they're just going to have a problem with it. And then the other problem they're running with is when you look at who Democrats select in primaries, right? Their base goes for guys like Mamdani. Their base goes for guys like this. What is it? Fatah, I think that just Omar Fatah that just won in Minneapolis. This is what they want. And so again, they're God bless them for being contested.
Their entire campaign trying to distance themselves from some of these people too.
Yeah.
Mamdani being one of them. I mean, Democrats are sounding the alarm on him, and he's probably going to win too. Which
he'll be another Brandon Johnson. Johnson's the mayor of Chicago. One of the most deeply unpopular politicians in America right now. He's got an approval rating that's like single digits.
Like Spanberger is going to be desperately trying to get herself separated from him and the whole deal. And meanwhile, we're going to keep on trying to brand them with that same thing, which can backfire. And it has backfired before. I remember when Dave Bratt was up against Abigail Spanberger, and it was like he was a broken record saying Nancy Pelosi. And it was this thing that they threw back at his face. Well, you're not running against Nancy Pelosi. You're running against Abigail Spanberger. And
she didn't have a voting record at that point. And so
she could brand herself anything she wanted to be at that point. And they thought they were going to be able to brand any Democrat as Nancy Pelosi. And it backfired hugely. And the thing is Dave Bratt is so much smarter than her, and he could have run circles around her. But when they were in the debate, all he kept repeating is Nancy Pelosi. And it was like, dude, did you forget to bring your brain to this debate? What happened here?
I think Dave got advice based off of how things were polling. Nancy Pelosi was
It was the consultant class pushing him to do that.
Nancy Pelosi was unpopular, and so that was the message they went with. We had similar problems in our race with Abigail Spanberger too on what outside groups wanted to focus on, which I thought was stupid, but we couldn't coordinate, so they ran their ads and we ran ours. But here's what we're going to go and do next. We're going to conclude all this on kind of like our analysis. So we've kind of gone through, we've looked at the different positions, the perspectives on where they're at, the various players that are impacting this. Now we're going to go around the table and we're going to give our predictions for 2026 with acknowledgement. I have to say this for Christian's benefit, or else he won't give me a prediction. A lot can change. A lot can change, right? We all understand that. We all recognize that. However, it's fun to make early predictions to see how things lay out. So I'm Christian. Look at me real quickly. I'm about to give all the caveats right now so you don't have to. Okay. All right. Caveat 1, ton of crap can change. If you're trying to seriously predict elections more than a year out on this level, you're almost a crazy person, right? You're almost a crazy person. 2, and everything we say here is kind of based off of the trends we're seeing right now. So this is kind of like, okay, election held today. This is what I think would happen, right? So we're acknowledging all of that. Those are, I think, are the 2 most important caveats. A lot can happen. We're making predictions based off of the trends that we currently see. And if these trends hold, we think this will take place. Christian, I'm going to give you one alibi. Is there one additional caveat you would like to add that I did not already mention?
No, I mean, as long as we just stress that we're 12.
He's worried about his record.
He's worried about his record because Christian's got a really good record. There's only been one time where Christian has been disappointed with his own analysis, and it was because he let himself get encouraged by what was going on. And we were all kind of pushing him like, come on, be optimistic. And we should have. We should have let Eeyore be Eeyore. but no, it's not Eeyore. Like I'm doing a character right here. Christian's always been good on, look, the numbers are what the numbers are. There's conditions, there's catalysts, but then there's fundamental numbers. And if those numbers don't say what they're supposed to, then you're not going to get the outcome. You're not going to win this thing based off of good feelings, vibes, and mysticism, right? It's like numbers are what they are. So, all right, Christian, I will let you, because you are the Oracle of Virginia, I will let you choose where you want to go in this order. You want to go last as far as predictions?
Sure.
Okay. You want me to go first, babe?
Go ahead.
Okay. Here are my predictions right here. I actually think we so right now go back to the Senate. I want to make sure I get this correctly because I think Georgia and North Carolina both have Democrat senators right now. Okay. I don't think it's possible. This is the other thing too. The other thing that I'm always kind of cautious about on making predictions is I don't want to discourage people from doing one thing or the other. So don't let my current predictions discourage you. Get out and vote for your candidates. But I think Michigan's going to be a tough pickup for us. I think we're actually going to, I think we had a good shot at winning the Senate seat in Georgia. North Carolina, I think, is going to be really, really close, but we can win it. Here's my crazy prediction, the one that Christian is going to look across the table from me and be like, okay, boomer. If Glenn Youngkin is our candidate for Senate, I think there's a chance we pick up that seat with Glenn.
What? That's a wild.
I think there's a chance we pick up that seat with Glenn, mainly because now there's 2 things. I'm going to add my own additional caveat for this particular race. It's going to depend in part on kind of federal workers. It's going to depend in part on what happens with our gubernatorial race this year, coming up in November. But I believe there is a path for Glenn Youngkin to be the next senator from Virginia. Okay, so when it comes to the House, I think we are both going to keep the House, and I think we're going to pick up seats. I'm not ready yet to say how many seats. If I had to guess right now, I think we pick up at least 5. At least 5 seats in the House, and I say we pick up 2. On a really good night, we pick up 3. Actually, let me change that a little bit. I think we're going to pick up 2 seats in the Senate because I think we might lose one. I think we could lose Maine. Not highly likely, but I think we could.
Not that Maine would matter that much. She pretty much, isn't that Susan Collins?
Yeah.
She's Democrat light anyway.
Anyway, I think we pick up 2. I think we pick up 2 in the Senate. I'm being optimistic, but I think 3 could be a very, very real possibility. So 5 in the House, 3 in the Senate. So I'm giving the overly optimistic one. This is barring the caveats I said. All right, Tina, What is your prediction for the midterms 2026?
You know, I think we are probably I would never have said the Glenn Youngkin thing, but I do, as you say it, I would say I could see this happening since Glenn Youngkin has won statewide in Virginia before, and he hasn't done anything stupid like what's his name did with his stupid macaca comment. So he hasn't done anything stupid, so that's good. Okay. So we're saying midterms because my brain is so wrapped around the axle about what's happening in Virginia this coming. So I won't say that. Okay.
No Virginia predictions.
All right. I think we barely hold on to the Senate, which kind of sucks because I think Susan Collins and Murkowski are just going to become the bane of our existence, to try to get anything through. But hey, at least we have more of a shot than if we didn't have the majority at all. So
you think we're going to lose seats in the Senate?
I think we barely hold on to the Senate.
Okay.
Barely. And so I think the Senate's going to be a pain in the butt, and J.D. Vance is going to have to come in and vote a lot. But I do think that we're going to hold it.
Okay.
And I think we'll hold the House. I don't know by how much.
Do you think we'll lose seats or gain seats in the House?
I think it's hard to say. Can you pull up the House map one more time for me?
I'm writing down these predictions in the show notes as well because we're going to go back to this and either mock or praise each other.
This is the current consensus map.
If what Christian says, if Texas really does do this thing and California isn't able to retaliate, because the one thing we didn't talk about is the fact that Gavin Newsom wants to retaliate and actually redraw his districts as well in order to sort of counteract what might happen. And so it all really kind of hinges on that. Let's say none of them did any of that. I think we just hold it with no gains. But if Texas is able to do that, I think we do gain. That's all.
So I believe here, I'll show you the Senate map and then I'll read off what I've got for the House. I think that Democrats are going to hold all their current seats. I think they're going to win Michigan. I think they're going to hold Georgia. I think they're going to flip Maine. And I'm really iffy about North Carolina.
Wait 1 second. Wait 1 second. Gosh dang, I'm trying to write all this down. Okay, do it one more time.
Okay. I think Democrats are going to flip one seat in the Senate, potentially two.
Okay.
I can't give you a prediction about North Carolina. I don't even know who the Republicans are running yet.
Yeah.
It's an open seat. But I have a feeling that they're going to flip at least one of North Carolina or Maine, and they're going to hold all their seats, including the two swing seats in Georgia and in Michigan.
Okay.
If a Democrat was in the White House, maybe that'd be a different story. But so I have a feeling that we're going to see a 48 to 51 Senate, maybe a 49 to 50 Senate. Well, I mean, at that point, it'd be basically 48 to 52 Senate,
50, okay,
maybe a 49 to 51.
The math don't math.
Yeah, I left out that there's still that open seat. But this is basically what I would have. And here, I'll color in everything to be clear there. I don't think they're going to flip any other states like Texas or Florida or Iowa or anything like that. But I have a feeling that it's going to look something like this. I'm just really iffy about North Carolina. That could go really either way.
Okay.
So, but I do have a feeling that they're going to flip either North Carolina or Maine, one or the other, potentially both, and they're going to hold everything else. So, worst case scenario, I think we're going to have a 41-50 or 49-51 Senate still in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, we hold these and we flip these. That would be great, but that'd be so unprecedented. Yeah. It's theoretically possible, but I think Democrats are going to pick up at least one, potentially two seats in the Senate.
But if Alberta becomes a state,
in the House, I think Democrats are going to pick up 8 to 10 seats. So I do think they're going to flip the House. I know I was.
So you think Dems are going to flip the House?
I would give it 2-to-1 odds that Democrats are going to flip the House of Representatives, even with the Texas situation, even with Ohio, even with Missouri.
This is amazing. Christian names this whole episode. Have Republicans already won in 2026?
And then I tell you at the very end, nope, we're going to lose.
Yeah, here's all the reasons. Here's all the reasons why.
Can you give your reasoning why?
Because presidential midterm, there's been an entire generation of the party in power losing control of the chamber, losing seats at the same time. I don't really care that we have a fundraising advantage, because at the end of the day, there will be a public backlash of some sort. I'm convinced of it. The president is polling quite well. He's actually polling better right now than Obama was at this point in his second term. But we've got another 14 months to go until people start tuning in. So imagine what his approval rating might be in 14 months. I'd hope it'd be positive, but history suggests that usually in a second term, your approval rating just declines.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, right now it's polling a D+3. It might end up being D+5 or D+6 by the time you get to the election.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be D+8. I don't think we're looking at a 2018 wipeout where we lose 30 or 40 seats.
But you think the Dems pick up the House by 1 or 2 seats?
I would right now I think that we're looking at something like a 220 to 215 Democrat House.
Okay, so they would be, so in order to do that, they would have to
they have a 2 or 3 seat majority.
Okay.
Because 218 is an absolute majority in the House. So this is why I said I think that they're going to pick up anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 seats, even after redistricting in Texas takes place.
Okay.
That really, if it weren't for the fact that there's redistricting going on in Texas and Ohio, I would up those odds to 80 to 90% chances that Democrats actually flip the chamber. But because the redistricting is working in our favor and we're in a better environment, I feel like I'm being quite generous here. People are probably thinking wow, you're dooming a lot.
Yeah.
No, we have a fundraising advantage. The president's approval rating is much better than it was in 2017. The polling is better and the geography is better. But yeah, I'm still going to give Democrats probably 2-to-1 odds to flip the House because look, we're just in a national polarized environment. I think it would be almost a miracle. Not quite, but almost a miracle for us to hold the House.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I'm giving you the quick summary of where we all did. So when you chapter this, you can go all the way to that chapter and see the prediction. So my predictions is I think we actually pick up to about 5 seats in the House. So we hold the House and pick up about 5 seats. And I think we could pick up 2 seats in the Senate. I'm actually a little bit more bullish on Georgia and North Carolina. Plus, my wild, crazy prediction, according to most people's numbers, is I think Glenn Youngkin can pull it off in Virginia. That one's going to be tough, but I figured I'd give you something exciting to hold me to account when the future comes. All right, Tina's prediction is basically no real gains. Maybe lose a couple seats here and there, but overall we hold the House and the Senate. Christian says we hold the Senate, probably lose at least 1 seat, possibly 2, but we hold the Senate. But Christian predicts we're going to lose we lose the House. He thinks that bottom line is the trends are trends for a reason. And even if we do really good, we're probably going to lose the House, maybe by a couple seats. So raise within majority, but there is. So those are the predictions made on this day, July 24th, 2025. Way closer than anybody else would be willing to predict this early on in it. But that's what you came here for. You came here for wild and crazy predictions with a decent amount of logic by it. So Ren Emil has one question. Will Trump try a tail wags the dog tactic? Ren Emil, you're going to have to be more specific before we can answer that one. I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure with that.
That's like starting a war to get like wagging the dog.
Oh, well, yeah, that was the movie. Well, the whole thing in politics is the tail wagging.
Basically starting some kind of scandal or war or skirmish or something somewhere else to draw attention away from.
To distract away from something else. But the thing is okay, so the way that phrase goes is how do you know the dog is smarter than the tail? Because if the tail was smarter, it would wag the dog, right? And there was this idea, there was a movie that came out about this where basically a president was having a scandal with something going on. I think it was sexually related or something like that. And so they hired consultants and Hollywood people to come in and create this kind of fake conflict that was going on in this foreign country. And then what they would do is press briefings, they would leak stuff out. Some people in the administration would leak stuff out. So now the press didn't care about, I think it was the Wilderness Girls or something like that. All they cared about was what's going on and, in Cronesia or something like that. And what are you talking about? We don't know what's going on. And then it looked like, the White House is holding back on this, conflict that's going on, and that distracted away. So would Trump try to do something like that? I don't know. I don't think so, but who knows, right? Anything can happen in politics. I'm not sure what it would be or what it would look like, but yeah. There we go. Harrison asked, question, I'm in an area you mentioned that could flip seats. How can I help them do that? Well, the way that you flip seats within a congressional race or a Senate race, whatever it might be, donations and knocking doors. Those are the two biggest ways that people can help a candidate actually win. You can also, there's also stuff on social media where you can, share whatever they're talking about or whatever the issues are or whatnot. But if someone were to ask me, Nick, how can I help your campaign? Any politician, the first thing they're going to say is, would you mind donating? Because that gives you the logistics you need in order to put your message out. The second one is, would you be willing to volunteer a door knock? Because door knocking is easily one of the most effective ways to do that. There's another way that you can actually do this. And we had Cliff Maloney on here a while back, Citizens Alliance. They do some of the best work you will ever see on door knocking and with things like ballot chasing. So a lot of the answer to your question depends on what state you live in and what's the method of voting in that particular state. So hope I answered that question. All right, guys, you've got our predictions. Thank you very much for joining. We will come back. We'll probably do a midterm election night special once again, where I will bring up these predictions and we will either point and laugh at each other, or we will say, my gosh, how did you know? Once again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next episode.